aka TAT. We're gonna take sales divided by total assets. It basically says how many dollars of asset do you need to generate 1 unit of sales. Okay. There's a related ratio. It's called capital intensity ratio. That's simply 1 over TAT or CAR is equal to total assets divided by sales. Again, the relevant numbers are somewhat industry dependent. Industrial companies need a lot more capital compared to companies like, Google, for example. So when you make comparisons of total asset turnover kind of ratios or even inventory turnover, you cannot compare inventory turnover of NVIDIA to Kroger. Okay, those are two different businesses. So you can't say, oh, Kroger has keeps their inventory only for 25 days or 30 days. NVIDIA keeps it, I don't know, maybe 90 days. Again, I'll leave it to you as an exercise to calculate that, but you're making apples to oranges comparison. So these kinds of ratios should be done within the same business lines. You cannot compare Google to NVIDIA. Google is essentially a software company, internet services. So they don't have much inventory, if any. On the other hand, NVIDIA does. So you can compare Microsoft to Google, but you can compare maybe Apple to NVIDIA. It's not in the book, but when I do analysis, sometimes I look at current asset turnover. Sales divided by current assets or days sales in current assets, 365 times current assets over sales. For example, let's calculate for NVIDIA uh, total assets. We already have the sales number. There's the balance sheet. Okay. Total assets 65,728. Current assets 44,345. So TAT would be where are you? Sales. Apparently, I didn't get the sales itself. 6922. So it's about 0.92. NVIDIA needs, at least in terms of book value, $92 worth of assets to generate $100 of sales. Or let's calculate days sales in current assets. That's 265. Usually you want that number to be relatively low. Remember, current assets are assets that do not earn much. They're either cash, accounts receivable, inventory, and stuff. But part of the reason that's very high for NVIDIA, of the $44 billion in current assets, about 25 is in cash and almost cash-like stuff. And this is at the end of January 2024. If you looked at their latest number, they have even more cash. So these numbers basically tell me to what extent companies capital intensive of different types of assets. Now let's look at profitability ratios. We're going to look at three of them: profit margin, PM, return on assets, ROA, and return on equity, ROE. These are all have net income in the numerator. PM is net income divided by sales. Okay. And ROA is net income divided by total assets. We have to immediately note that ROE can be written as equity multiplier times ROA, or EM times ROA. So ROE is basically a leveraged profitability number. ROA simply says how many dollars of net income are you using per dollar of assets. Remember, not all of the assets are funded by your own equity. You borrowed some of it. There is another one we can write, and I'm going to kind of go through this myself. You can write ROA, which is net income divided by total assets, right? Well, I'm going to creatively multiply that with 1, sales over sales, and rearrange things. So that's net income over sales times sales over total assets. The first ratio we can easily recognize from the definition. That's the profit margin, okay? And the second ratio is TAT. If we put those two together, let me highlight these. we can write ROE as PM times TAT times EM. Let me use a different highlighting color for that. This identity is known as the DuPont identity for a very simple reason. It was first used by the company DuPont, the chemical company. It basically decomposes return on equity into three different components. A company may have a high return on equity for three different reasons or a combination thereof. They may have a high profit margin. Remember, profit margin is how many dollars of sales do you get to keep as net income out of $100 of sales or out of $1 of sales.